I want you to understand what I had before I tell you what was done to it. People talk about betrayal like it's a single moment, a door kicked open, a phone screen flipped face up, a voice that says the wrong name at the wrong time. But the truth is more patient than that. Betrayal doesn't announce itself. It lives inside something you love, quietly, feeding off it, until the day you find out it was never really yours. My name is Ethan Hale. I'm 36 years old. And I'm going to tell you exactly what happened in the house I built, with the brother I trusted, and the wife I gave everything to. Start with the house. 3 bedrooms, solid neighborhood, corner lot that floods a little in spring, but nothing the drainage work didn't eventually fix. I bought it at 29, which made me the youngest homeowner in my immediate circle by about 4 years, and I won't pretend I wasn't proud of that. The mortgage was in my name alone. The down payment came from 7 years of careful saving, no vacations I couldn't afford, no car I couldn't pay off in 18 months, no credit card balance I let sit past 30 days. I was disciplined before I was ever anything else. It's how I was built. The hardwood floors in the main hallway and living room, I refinished those myself the summer I moved in. Rented a floor sander, bought the stain myself, spent an entire weekend on my knees with a brush and a rag and a playlist I never want to hear again because it's burned into every hour of that project. My brother Daniel came over both days. He showed up Saturday morning with the sander on a borrowed trailer and told me he was billing me in beer. We worked for 2 days straight, ate sandwiches on the back porch, talked about nothing important. At the end of the second day, we reorganized the hallway closet together, shoved in the tool bags, stacked the dropped cloths, leaned my old baseball bat in the corner where it had nowhere better to be. When it was all done, we stood in the doorway and looked at what we'd built together, and I thought, this is what a brother is, someone who shows up, someone you don't have to ask twice. I want you to hold onto that image. It's going to matter later and not in a good way. My career, 12 years in logistics, which is a field most people don't think about until a package doesn't arrive. I started as a dispatcher running overnight freight schedules out of a warehouse that smelled like diesel and ambition. I moved up through operations coordinator, regional analyst, and landed where I am now, senior operations manager at a firm that moves industrial goods across 3 states. I'm not wealthy. I make good money and I manage it well. Retirement account funded, savings account healthy, 1 remaining mortgage and no other debt. I travel for work occasionally, a few days here, a week there. Logistics conferences, site visits, vendor negotiations, routine, unremarkable. I had never once had a reason to come home early. Until I did. Then there's Claire. I met Claire Voss 6 years ago at a mutual friend's birthday dinner, one of those long, crowded restaurant tables where you end up wedged between someone you barely know and someone you're about to know very well. She was 31, sharp in a way that didn't announce itself right away, the kind of sharp that reveals itself gradually, in small cuts. She looked at me across that table like I was someone worth taking seriously. I remember thinking that was rare. That kind of attention, the kind that's actually paying attention, doesn't come along as often as people think. We dated 11 months. Neither of us was interested in a long engagement, so we didn't have one. 30 guests, a rented garden space, good catering, no drama. She had been managing a mid-sized retail location when we met, organized, decisive, good at navigating difficult people in difficult moments. After the wedding, by mutual agreement, she stopped working. I covered everything. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, both car payments, every bill that arrived in that mailbox. I never once threw it in her face. Never once made her feel like a dependent or a burden or a charity. That was the arrangement we chose together, and I honored it without asterisks or conditions. Our marriage, by the time this story takes place, had passed through the early fire and settled into something I genuinely believed was better. The electric urgency of new love fades for everyone. That's not failure, that's physics. What replaced it in our house was shared routine, comfortable evenings, a kitchen that smelled like the food she made because she'd learned what I liked. We talked about having children more than once. Never committed. Something was always in the way, timing, finances, the vague mutual sense of not being ready. I think about that now. I am glad, with a heaviness I can't fully name, that we didn't. And then Daniel. Younger than me by 2 years, freelance contractor, renovation, whoa. RK handyman jobs, the occasional subcontracting gig when a friend needed someone reliable enough to show but never quite reliable enough to make a career of. Charismatic in the easy, careless way of men who have always known someone would catch them. He came over 2 or 3 times a week. Dinner, drinks, football. He and Claire got along naturally from the very beginning. She cooked extra when she knew he was coming. Lasagna, usually. Daniel's favorite. I thought it was generosity. I thought she was being a good host. I thought their easy rapport was something to feel warm about, a wife who welcomed your family, a brother who felt at home in your house. I thought a lot of things, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Right now, in this first chapter of what I'm telling you, I need you to see what I had. A paid-down house with floors I refinished by hand. A marriage I'd honored every single day for 6 years. A brother I would have done anything for. Work I'd built from the ground up with a decade of patience and discipline. I was not a cold husband. I was not absent. I was not the kind of man who drives a woman into someone else's arms by neglect or cruelty or indifference. I was a man who paid every bill, showed up every night, and trusted the 2 people closest to him without a second thought. I had a logistics conference coming up. 2 nights away, routine, unremarkable, nothing I'd thought twice about booking. I kissed Claire goodbye on the front porch the morning I left. Her hand rested on my arm for a moment before she let go. "Drive safe," she said. She was already lying to me when she said it. I just didn't know it yet. I came home to surprise her. She wasn't there. But something in our bedroom trash bin was, and it told me everything I had refused to consider. The conference deal closed a day early. It doesn't happen often in logistics. Timelines slip forward, rarely back. But a vendor conceded faster than expected. We signed off, and by late Thursday afternoon, I was at the airport looking at a Friday morning return flight I no longer needed to take. I changed it without overthinking. There was a mild, uncomplicated pleasure to it, the small luxury of an unexpected homecoming, the idea of walking through the door unannounced, maybe taking Claire to dinner at the Italian place we hadn't been to in months. Something spontaneous. It had been a while. I remember thinking that. It had been a while since we'd done something spontaneous. I hold that thought sometimes now, the way you press a bruise to remind yourself it's still there. I landed mid-afternoon on Thursday. Took a car home. Claire's car was in the driveway, which wasn't unusual. She walks sometimes, runs errands on foot, visits the neighbor 2 doors down who grows tomatoes and needs someone to talk to. I let myself in, left my bag in the entryway, and called her name once. Nothing. Quiet house, afternoon light coming through the side windows at that low amber angle. I figured she'd stepped out briefly. I took my bag upstairs to unpack. The bedroom looked the way it always did. Made bed, her nightstand neat, the decorative wicker basket on the dresser that she'd owned since before we met. I unzipped my bag on the bed and started sorting laundry. And then I looked at the trash bin beside the dresser. There are moments in life that divide into before and after with a precision that doesn't feel real until you're standing in them. I have had a few. The death of my grandfather. A near miss on an icy overpass 6 winters ago. And this, standing in my own bedroom, looking into a small wicker trash bin, with a feeling like gravity had shifted 2 degrees and everything in the room was quietly, permanently wrong. A used condom. I stood there and let my mind do what minds do. It cycled through every alternative explanation with the rapid, desperate efficiency of a machine running diagnostics on a system that's already failed. Medical. A leftover. Misidentified. I tested each one and discarded each one in roughly 4 seconds because we had not used condoms in 6 years of marriage. Not once. There was no prescription conflict, no medical conversation that would explain it, no history. A used condom in the bedroom trash bin of a woman who shared my bed had exactly one explanation. And some part of me, the animal part, the part that lives below reason, had already arrived at it before I finished the sentence. My hands went cold first. Then there was a sound in my ears like pressure dropping, the way a cabin feels when descent begins. Then something structural, somewhere in my chest, gave way so quietly I almost didn't feel it happen. Not grief, not yet. Something more like the specific, nauseating lucidity that arrives when a thing you feared becomes a thing you know. I picked it up with a tissue, looked at it. It was recent. I put it back exactly as I found its same position, same angle, and I went downstairs. I sat on the couch. I did not call Claire. I did not call anyone. I set my phone face down on the cushion beside me, and I sat with it, with what I knew, and I let myself think. Here is what I thought. If I confronted her tonight, what did I have? One piece of evidence she could deny. She could claim it was old, left over from before the marriage, misidentified, anything. She could cry. She could flip it. She could turn a confrontation about her betrayal into a question about my stability, my trust, my willingness to accuse her on the basis of one thing she had a dozen explanations for. I had watched enough of these situations play out, friends, coworkers, the quiet devastations that reshaped people's lives, to know that an accusation without airtight proof is a gift to the person being accused. And if this went to divorce, which some cold, already decided part of me had accepted it would, she walked with half. Half of the house I'd bought at 29, that I'd refinished by hand, that I'd paid every bill on for 6 years. Half of savings I'd built across a decade of discipline. Half of everything I had given without conditions and without complaint. I was not willing to give her that. Not for this. Not for what she had been doing in my house, in my bed, while I was working to pay for all of it. I needed proof, not suspicion, not a single item in a trash bin. I needed documentation, time-stamped, undeniable, legally presentable documentation, and then I needed a lawyer, and then I needed a plan. In that order, with patience. I made the decision the way I make all decisions that matter, quietly, rationally, and completely. No drama, no announcement, just a door closing inside me, soft and final. When Claire came home that evening, I was on the couch, calm. I looked up when I heard the key in the lock, and I smiled when she appeared in the doorway, because I had already decided who I was going to be until the moment I chose to stop being him. She lit up when she saw me, crossed the room, hugged me with both arms. "I didn't expect you back until tomorrow," she said, pulling back to look at me. "The conference wrapped early," I answered. "Wanted to surprise you." She laughed that familiar, easy laugh and went to the kitchen to make dinner. We ate across the table from each other. She talked about her week, a friend's new apartment, something her mother said on the phone, a show she'd been watching. I listened. I nodded. I laughed in the right places. She had no idea. That evening was the strangest performance of my life, not because I struggled to hold it together, but because I held it together perfectly and she couldn't see any of it. I lay next to her that night and stared at the ceiling while her breathing slowed into sleep, and I felt something I hadn't expected: clarity. Not peace, but the hard, clean clarity of a man who has decided what happens next and simply needs to let it unfold. By the time her breathing evened out, I had already decided what I was going to buy in the morning. I just needed to wait until she was asleep to make the list. I was out of the house before 6 the next morning. She was still asleep, her breathing slow, and even no idea I was already gone. I dressed in the dark, moved through the house without turning on a single light, closed the front door behind me with the quiet precision of a man who has decided to be invisible for a while. The electronics store opened at 7. I was in the parking lot at 6:45. There's something clarifying about a task that has only one purpose. No ambiguity, no competing options. I walked those fluorescent-lit aisles with the focused attention of someone who had already done the research in his head the night before. A sales clerk appeared and tried to interest me in a monitoring package: cloud storage subscription, professional installation, monthly service fee. "I've got what I need," I told him politely. He backed off. Some people understand when a man has already made his decisions. I selected 4 high-definition wireless cameras. Small units, matte housing, motion-triggered, feeding continuously to an encrypted private cloud account accessible only through an app on my phone. The kind that holds up in a courtroom. The kind that doesn't lie, doesn't hesitate, doesn't forget. I paid in cash. Back at the house before Claire stirred, I spent 90 minutes installing each camera with the same care I gave anything I built with my hands. The first went behind the framed photograph on the hallway shelf, a group shot from a vacation 2 summers ago, Claire and I and a couple of friends, the kind of picture that becomes furniture over time. The camera angled through the frame to cover the front door and the entryway. The second I positioned inside the upper corner cabinet in the kitchen, tucked behind the edge of a rarely used serving bowl, capturing the countertops, the table, and the hallway entrance. The third I recessed between the spines of books on the living room shelf, novels and reference volumes that hadn't been opened in months, covering the couch and the corridor leading toward the bedroom. The fourth went in the bedroom itself, nestled inside the decorative wicker basket on the dresser. The basket Claire had owned for years and never moved, never touched except to dust around it once a month. Every camera linked to the app. I tested every angle, nothing was left uncovered. When Claire came downstairs, I was in the kitchen, coffee ready. I handed her a cup and told her over breakfast that I had another work trip coming up in about 2 weeks, a second conference that had been on the calendar for months. "Already," she replied, wrapping both hands around the mug. "Already," I said, "should be the last one for a while." She nodded and moved on to something else, and I watched her face for anything that flickered. Nothing did. She was good. I gave her that. The days that followed were a study in what I will only call discipline, because I don't have a better word for the experience of monitoring your own home from a smartphone while living in it and pretending everything is ordinary. I checked the feed at intervals throughout the workday and saw nothing that alarmed me. Claire watching television, calling her mother from the kitchen, carrying groceries in from the car, watering the plants on the back porch. Daniel did not come over during this stretch at all, which was a deviation from his usual 2 to 3 times a week pattern. I thought about that. I wondered if they had grown careful. I decided it didn't change anything. Every angle was covered. I wasn't going anywhere. Then the second trip arrived. I packed my bag deliberately the way I always did, kissed Claire's cheek at the door, told her I'd be back Friday. "Stay safe," she said, the same words she always used. I want to slow down here because what happened next in that hotel room is the part of this story that will stay with me longer than anything else. Not the confrontation, not the dinner, not even the ending. This moment, in a hotel room 2 states away, watching a small rectangle of footage on my phone while the television played something I wasn't watching. It was the second evening away. I was reviewing earlier footage from that afternoon, and I watched Claire take a phone call in the kitchen. The audio from that distance was ambient and insufficient, nothing I could make out clearly. But her body language changed completely in the first 4 seconds of the call. Something shifted in her posture, in the set of her shoulders, in the way her face moved. She walked out of the kitchen to finish the call in the hallway, out of the camera's primary audio range, though still partially visible on the motion track. When she came back into the kitchen, she was texting. Fast, both thumbs, the posture of someone responding to something that excited them. And her face, I knew that face. I had not seen it in a long time, but I recognized it. The particular brightness of anticipation that someone is trying not to show but can't entirely conceal. I set the phone down. I noted the time. I ordered room service and made myself eat the whole meal slowly without tasting any of it. I made myself sleep as discipline, sleep as preparation. The next morning I opened the app before I got out of bed, switched to the front door camera. Daniel's car was already in the driveway. And the door, my front door, the threshold of the house I bought alone and paid down over 6 years, was opening from the inside before he even reached the bell. Claire pulling it open, reaching for his collar before he'd fully crossed the frame. His hands on her waist, the ease of it. The practiced, unhurried comfort of 2 people who have done this many times before in a space they long ago stopped thinking of as anyone else's. I watched all of it, every camera, every angle, bedroom, living room, kitchen. I did not fast forward. I made myself watch the entirety because evidence that you've reviewed is evidence you can present without flinching, and I knew even then that flinching was not something I could afford. I downloaded it to an encrypted folder, backed it up in 3 separate locations. My hands were steady the entire time. When it was done, I closed the app, sat on the edge of the hotel bed, And I gave myself 1 hour, precisely 1 hour. I watched the clock to feel whatever I needed to feel. I'm not going to describe what happened in that hour. Some things don't require an audience. When the hour ended, I closed the door on it, straightened up, called my lawyer's office. Not next week, tomorrow morning, first available appointment. I had everything I needed. The only question left was how I wanted them to find out. What? My lawyer's name is Elaine Marsh. She is 53 years old, has been practicing family law for 26 of those years, and she looked at my footage in complete silence for 11 minutes. Before she said a single word. What she said was, "With this, she gets nothing." She said it the way doctors deliver results, not unkindly, but without softening the facts, because the facts don't require softening when they're in your favor. We spent an hour going through the documentation, timestamps, multiple angles, duration, date correspondence with my confirmed travel records. She began drafting the divorce papers before I left her office. "When do you want them filed?" she asked, looking up from her notepad. "Hold them for now," I told her. "There's a family dinner already scheduled, the whole family, both sides. I want to wait until after." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she wrote something on her notepad and didn't ask any further questions. That's the kind of lawyer you want when you're planning something irreversible. I flew home from the second trip on Friday as scheduled. Claire picked me up from the airport. I kissed her cheek at arrivals, loaded my bag into the car, sat in the passenger seat, and asked about her week. She answered easily, her voice warm and unbothered, the voice of a woman who believes she has gotten away with something. I listened. I said the right things. She reached over at a red light and put her hand briefly on mine, and I turned my palm up to hold it for a moment, because that was what I would have done in a world where none of this had happened. The family dinner had been on the calendar for 3 weeks. We hosted quarterly, a rotating arrangement among the households, and this rotation had landed on us. Her parents, Gerald and Maureen Voss. Gerald spent 32 years as a high school principal, a man of measured speech and careful observation, the kind of person who rarely says something he doesn't mean and rarely omits something he does. Maureen had been a hospital administrator for 20 years, sharp in a way that's been refined by decades of difficult conversations and impossible decisions. They had always treated me with genuine warmth. They had always made me feel like a son-in-law who was actually part of the family. My parents, Raymond and Patricia Hale. My father spent his career as a site foreman, a man who communicates more in silences than most people do in paragraphs. My mother notices everything. She has always noticed everything. She stores it somewhere private and patient, and she brings it out only when she needs to. And Daniel, who arrived last, as he always did, walked through my front door with a grin and a bottle of wine and clapped me on the shoulder. "How'd the last trip go?" he asked. "Really well," I replied. "I actually brought back something for everyone." He laughed. He thought I was joking. "I spent the entire day cooking." I want you to understand what that felt like, to stand in a kitchen preparing a meal you know will be the last one, for a gathering you know will end in pieces. There was something almost ritualistic about it. I timed each dish with precision, the braised short ribs that needed 3 hours, the roasted potatoes that went in at the 90-minute mark, the salad constructed fresh at the last moment. I set the table with the good dishes, the ones that usually stayed in the cabinet, the cloth napkins. The candlesticks Claire had bought at some market 2 years ago and kept for special occasions. It was a special occasion, just not the one she was expecting. Dinner was long and warm, the way good family dinners are. Gerald talked about a trip he and Maureen were considering, the Pacific Northwest, a rental house near the coast. Patricia asked about my job, the logistics deal I'd closed, whether the firm was growing into new regions. The wine was good and nobody rushed. Daniel was relaxed across the table, joking easily, reaching for the bread, filling glasses that didn't need filling yet just to have something to do with his hands. He caught my eye once and gave me a small, comfortable smile. The smile of a man who has no idea there is a trap beneath every floorboard in this room. I gave him the same smile back. Somewhere in the middle of the main course, while the conversation moved around me like water, and I contributed just enough to stay invisible, A memory surfaced with the vivid, uninvited clarity that memories have when you're about to lose something. The weekend we refinished these floors, just the two of us. 2 days on our knees with a sander and a stained brush, eating sandwiches on the back porch, talking about his work and my work and nothing that mattered. Stacking the dropped cloths at the end of the second day, leaning the baseball bat in the corner of the closet because it had nowhere better to go. I had thought, standing in this hallway when we were done and the floors were still wet and the light was catching them right. This is what a brother is. Someone who shows up, someone you never have to question. I let the memory sit for a moment. Then I let it go. After the plates were cleared, after the second bottle of wine was mostly gone and everyone had settled into the loose, unhurried ease that follows a long dinner, I stood up. I tapped my glass with the handle of a knife. Once, the sound cut through the room. Everyone looked at me. Claire looked at me, soft eyes in the candlelight, a small smile forming at the corner of her mouth, warm, utterly unsuspecting, because she thought this was a toast. Because of course she did. Because she had no framework available to her for what was actually about to happen. I spoke calmly. I said I had been very lucky in my life, that I had built something real, a home, a career, a family I believed in completely, that I had trusted the people at this table with things I'd spent years building. I paused. Then I said I wanted to show everyone something, and I walked to the television. I pressed play. The room understood within 4 seconds. It was HD footage, time-stamped, daylit, shot from multiple angles in multiple rooms of this house at this address on dates that corresponded precisely with my confirmed travel records. There was nothing ambiguous about any of it, no alternative interpretation available. This was not a question, and it was not a misunderstanding, and there was no version of reality in which what was playing on that screen was anything other than exactly what it was. Maureen made a sound I will never be able to describe adequately. A sound like something breaking that was never designed to be broken, not grief exactly, and not rage, but the collision of both at a frequency that doesn't have a name. Gerald pushed his chair back hard and looked at his daughter like he was seeing a stranger sitting inside a face he'd known for 33 years. Patricia pressed both hands over her mouth, elbows on the table, very still. My father said Daniel's name, once, with the quiet, final weight of a man closing a door he will never open again. Claire's face collapsed. Not physically, she didn't fall, didn't faint. But everything that she had maintained across however long this had been going on, the composure, the ease, the practiced normalcy, came apart at once, completely in real time. She was crying before the footage was halfway through, not delicate crying. Ugly, heaving, mascara-tracking sobs that no one at that table moved toward. There was no comfort available to her in this room. She had used it all up. I turned the television off. The silence was total except for Claire. I reached into my jacket pocket and placed the divorce papers on the table in front of her. Not slid, not thrown, placed, flat, centered, precise. Sign them, I said, my voice completely level. The lawyer has already been fully briefed. You will receive nothing. She looked up at me, face destroyed, eyes swollen, and opened her mouth to speak. I raised one hand. There is nothing you can say to me, I told her. The room held its breath. Daniel stood. He mumbled something about needing air, needing to leave, and began moving toward the hallway, his eyes very carefully not meeting anyone's. I stepped directly in front of him. He stopped. The room was watching. I excused myself for one moment. I walked calmly to the hallway closet, the same closet Daniel and I had organized together the weekend we built these floors, where the baseball bat had leaned in the corner ever since, and I returned to the dining room. I was holding it. Solid wood, 32 inches, never needed, never touched. Daniel looked at it and every color left his face at once. Ethan, he said, his voice breaking on the word. Ethan, wait. I want to be precise about something before I tell you what happened next. I was not out of my mind. I was not in a blackout, not running on pure adrenaline, not lost somewhere below rational thought. I heard every word Daniel said. I heard my name in his voice, the same voice that had called me Ethan my entire life. I heard wait and I'm sorry and please and every other word that arrives too late to matter. I heard all of it, I considered it, and I did not stop. He had backed against the dining room wall, both hands raised, palms out, moving sideways toward the window. His eyes were on the bat, and his face was the face of a man who has finally understood the full weight of what he's done, and is trying to find a way to put it somewhere other than his body. There wasn't one. The first swing caught him across the left shoulder and ribs and drove him hard into the drywall. He hit it with his full weight and went sideways, one arm slamming into the window frame, and for a moment the room seemed to hold its breath, chairs scraping, voices starting and stopping, Patricia crying somewhere behind me and calling both our names at once. Gerald was on his feet, shouting something across the room. Claire was past words, both hands over her face, making sounds that had stopped being language. My father had not moved from his chair. He sat at the far end of the table with his hands flat on the tablecloth, watching his two sons, and his face held an expression I could not fully read and have thought about many times since. Daniel hadn't gone down yet. He caught himself on the wall, turned, and tried to get his bearings. The second swing connected before he finished the motion. This one drove the air out of him completely. I heard it leave, a compressed, involuntary sound, and he bent forward and went to his hands and knees on the hardwood floor. Someone grabbed my arm. I shrugged them off. Daniel looked up at me from the floor. His face was white. He was trying to say something, but his breath hadn't come back yet, and the words didn't make it past his chest. He got one knee under himself. The third swing was deliberate, across the ribs the same side as the first. I measured it. That was the one that finished it. He went down, and he did not get up. What he did instead, and I will not pretend this didn't register somewhere in me, some small and permanent place, was crawl. Across the hardwood floor that I had refinished with my own hands. Across the threshold of the hallway, past the closet where the bat had spent 6 years doing nothing, out the front door and onto the porch. He collapsed on the steps with one arm cradling his ribs and his face against the painted wood, unable to stand. Someone inside the house was calling an ambulance. I registered the voice without identifying it. I did not make the call myself. I walked back into the dining room. I found what remained in my wine glass. I returned to the head of the table. I sat down. I did not speak. I did not look at Claire, who had come apart completely in her chair and was trying to breathe. I did not explain myself to Gerald, who had gone very quiet in the way of a man who has seen something he is still organizing. I did not respond to Patricia, who had stopped crying and was looking at me with an expression I cannot describe except to say that it was not condemnation. I sat at the head of my table in my house, with the wreckage of what two people had chosen to do to me spread across every corner of the room, and I waited. I was done performing. I was done planning. I was done being patient and controlled and invisible. I had built this floor. I had cooked that meal. I had trusted that man with the foundation of everything I owned, and now every person in this room knew exactly what that had been worth to him, and exactly what it had cost. The guests left one by one over the following 30 minutes, and I let them go without ceremony. Gerald and Maureen were first. Gerald came to stand beside my chair before he put his coat on, and he placed one hand briefly on my shoulder without saying anything. He didn't need to. Maureen stopped in the doorway on her way out. She turned back toward the room, toward Claire, specifically, though she didn't look at her directly, and she spoke in a voice that was completely controlled and utterly final. "I no longer have a daughter," she said. Then she walked out into the dark, and the door closed behind her. I did not invite that. It arrived on its own, the way consequences tend to when there's no longer anyone left to deflect them. My mother hugged me at the door for a long time without saying a word. Some things don't need words to be complete. My father shook my hand at the threshold, met my eyes, and nodded once, a single, slow nod that said everything a man like my father knows how to say in a moment like that. Then they were gone, too. Claire slept on the couch that night. She had nowhere else to go and was in no condition to go anywhere. By the end of the week, she had signed every page of the divorce papers. Elaine Marsh had been thorough and exact as I had paid her to be. The house stayed in my name. The savings account stayed. The car stayed. The joint account had already been restructured in the days before the dinner, a quiet task completed while Claire was visiting her mother, so there was nothing left to contest. She left with 2 suitcases and the clothes she was wearing, and she did not argue, because there was nothing left to argue with. Daniel, 2 broken ribs, a fractured wrist from where his arm hit the window frame. He called our parents from the hospital that night. They did not come. He has not called me. I don't expect that he will. In the weeks that followed, I repainted the bedroom, bought new sheets, something I had not done in 6 years because the old ones were fine, because I am not someone who replaces things that are still working. Except those sheets were not fine anymore, and I replaced them without ceremony. New mattress, new nightstand lamp, small changes that added up to a room that no longer held anything of hers. I took 1 week off work, the first full week I'd taken in 3 years. I filled it with sleep that was longer and cleaner than anything I'd had in months. Food I chose myself, eaten when I was hungry and not when a schedule dictated it, and silence. The particular silence of a house that is entirely and only yours, that you have earned back from something that tried to take it. That holds your things and your floors and your work and nothing that doesn't belong there. I have thought about what I would say to someone who tells me I went too far. I have thought about it carefully, which is the only way I know how to think about things that matter. I think about the condom in the trash bin. I think about Daniel's car in my driveway and the way my door opened from the inside before he even reached the bell. I think about 6 years of a life I built without shortcuts and paid for without complaint and offered without conditions. And every time I come to the end of that thinking, I land in the same place, quietly, without drama, without regret. I went exactly far enough. They chose to destroy something real, something that took years to build and cost something actual to maintain. They made that choice in my house, in my bedroom, on the floors I built with my own hands, the same floors Daniel crawled across on his way out the door. And they made it without a second thought for what it would mean when I found out. Real things, when they break, leave marks. They left theirs on me, I left mine on them. And now I sit at the head of my table in the quiet of a house that belongs entirely to me, and I feel not happy exactly, not triumphant, something simpler and more durable than either of those. I feel like a man who gave everything he had, was betrayed by the people he trusted most, and made sure they understood the full weight of what they had thrown away.